Good morning, friends. Thank you for joining us here online. We definitely miss meeting in person with all of you this week, but as many of you have heard, there's a bit of a flu A outbreak in our church, and flu A is highly contagious and very serious, and so we definitely didn't want to risk spreading that to anyone else. And so your pastor has also had it this weekend. As you also may have heard, he headed up to West Virginia for a 2-day speaking event with our friends Bobby and Stacy with the Bay 6 project up there. Very important work. Many of you may remember having met them when they came here with their family and spoke at our church. But yeah, he went up there to do a 2-day speaking event, got up there on Friday night, started feeling horrible, and ended up in the emergency room about 1:30 in the morning. And they gave him some IV fluids, did a swab, and sure enough, he tested positive for flu A. So went up there with the whole intention of getting to hang out with friends, getting to speak, which he loves to do, and ended up sleeping or trying to sleep in a cabin by himself for 2 days. So definitely things did not go as planned, and that's part of life, right? We all face disappointments and setbacks. He is home safely this morning. He left early this morning from up there in West Virginia. It's about a 3.5-hour drive. Thankfully, he was feeling well enough to come back home. So he did make it back home safely this morning. A little bit of an update for you on me. So I recently was accepted for an internship for a hospital chaplaincy program. This particular internship will also give me the ability to be a chaplain in corrections, which either one of those are my dream jobs. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, but I was super excited to start this internship. I was supposed to start tomorrow. Found out on Friday that due to some just paperwork, red tape, bureaucracy on the hospital's end, that the program has to be delayed until March. So again, just another one of those life disappointments, setbacks that we all face. I've certainly experienced ones that are much more severe than that. But yeah, just wanted to join with you this morning and chat a bit about staying the course with God, even when life issues us pain or disappointment or doesn't go the way that we planned. So grab your coffee, get cozy. Let's chat for a moment. But first, let's pray. God, we thank you so much for the gift of life. Thank you for the advantage of social media and being able to gather together in this way, even though we can't meet in person. I pray for the health and safekeeping of everyone within our church body. Would you strengthen our immune systems and keep us healthy and strong? Would you remind us that you're with us this week, no matter what we face? I pray that you will speak a word to someone through our time together this morning. Pray that you will encourage them, strengthen them, sharpen their faith, and help us to continue to grow in relationship with you, Jesus, and shine your light and your love to those around us. In Jesus' name, amen. Staying the course with God. In the book of James, that's one of my favorite books in the New Testament. James was the brother of Jesus. But in chapter 1, verses 2-4, it says this: "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." And this word trials, if you were to translate it in the Greek, it translates out as trials and temptations or difficult situations that test one's faith and character. So I don't know about you, but my knee-jerk reaction or my human tendency whenever I face a situation that tests my faith and my character, which usually means it's like an aggravating or annoying or very frustrating situation in life, my first inclination is not to consider it pure joy. If you are much more mature in your spiritual walk and your life than I am, kudos to you, but that is not my first human tendency when facing difficulties, is just consider it pure joy. I eventually arrive there, but nevertheless, James tells us to consider it pure joy whenever we face situations that test our faith and character, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And so perseverance, that ability to stick with something, even when it really stinks, it's really hard. You would rather just quit and walk away and be done with that. The testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. And we know that that's the whole goal of our spiritual experience, our walk with the Lord, is to be transformed more into the image of his son, Jesus, and into his character. And so difficulties, we can consider it pure joy because it produces perseverance, the ability to long suffer through something, the ability to stay the course with God so that we may be mature and complete and not lacking anything. There are spiritual lessons that all of us go through in this life that no one wants to learn. If I were to do a sign-up sheet here at the church, classes on being ghosted or betrayed by a friend, or classes on grief and heartbreak, or classes on patience. But here's the caveat. Part of those classes is that you have to experience all of those situations in real time. How many of you would be the first to sign up? You're not the only one. No one would. But to be human for any length of time, you do not escape these situations in life, right? To be in relationship is you're going to be betrayed at some point. You're going to be hurt by someone that you never saw it coming. I have been through ghosting in friendships and betrayal in friendships that you're blindsided by, that you never saw coming. You never saw that person as one day just seeing you as not being essential to their life, even though there was no fallout. There was nothing that happened. Like it can take years to heal from that. And there are people in the Bible who also experience that. We know that Joseph, he wasn't betrayed by a friend, he was betrayed by his own brothers. And when I think of a healthy sibling dynamic, healthy being the key word here, I think of your siblings as being your ride or die. Like that's your person that no matter what's going on in life, no matter what time in the middle of the night you got to call them, they are that person that's going to be there. They've got your back. They've got your best interests. They're going to defend you if someone's talking smack about you. Like your sibling has you. Not in Joseph's situation. In Joseph's situation, his siblings were terribly jealous of him because they felt like his father loved him more than they did them. And they sell him to slave traders. And if you follow the story, you know that he ends up falsely imprisoned for 13 years for something that he didn't do. But he chose to remain faithful to God during that time. And no matter what difficulty he was facing, he was like, I'm not going to dishonor God. And God put him in a position of very high command and used his situation where he ended up imprisoned in Egypt to deliver the people during that time out of a famine. And he ultimately allowed for reconciliation and healing to happen with his brothers. And we know later on in Joseph's story that he has 2 sons, and he names one of them a name. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but the name means, if you were to translate it, that God has made me forget my suffering. And so we know that God was faithful to Joseph and redeemed his story so much that he nearly forgot the pain of all the suffering that his brothers had cost him. That's just one example. We know that Cain murdered his brother Abel. We know that Judas kissed Jesus in one moment and then sold him into the hands of the enemy in the next. And so the pain, the betrayal, the ghosting that we experience in relationships here in this life that we don't understand, that can't make sense this side of heaven. Like there are people, even Jesus experienced that. And God is faithful to redeem all of that in our lives if we stay the course with him. Grief and heartbreak, like that's another one. None of us would volunteer ourselves for that. I have been through grief that was so painful that I remember laying in fetal position and not knowing how I was going to make it through the next day of my life, the years that were ahead. We all know what it's like to lose someone and to just live with that hole in you and that void in you that no amount of time erases. Time helps you learn to live with the pain and learn to carry the pain, but that pain is always there. That person's absence is always felt. And we are not alone in that either. We know that, if you read the book of Hosea, he was told to go marry a prostitute. which no one would want to do, right? And so he follows the command. He marries his wife Gomer, and repeatedly throughout the course of their relationship, she was unfaithful to him. And if you've ever experienced infidelity, you know that that's a very unique kind of pain, that it messes up your ability to trust for years, not just trust in intimate relationships, but trust in work relationships, trust in friendships, your trust in God. Like it really messes you up to the core. And so Hosea definitely experienced that. We know that King David experienced the grief and heartbreak of losing his son, Absalom. He was king at the time. If you read in 2 Samuel, Absalom betrayed King David by trying to overthrow him. And at one point in the story, Absalom, his son, is fleeing on a mule, and his long hair, he goes underneath like an oak tree with huge branches, and horrible story. His hair gets tangled up in the branches and he's hanging there but still alive. And Joab, the commander of King David's army, ends up finishing him off. And even though King David had been betrayed by his son, his response when learning that Absalom had died in this tragic way, his response is this: "Oh, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you, oh Absalom, my son." And like, I get choked up when I read that, because I know as a parent, like, it doesn't matter what your kids do. There's nothing they could do in this life. There's no amount of disappointment or betrayal that they could do to you as a parent where you wouldn't willingly take their place, in the same way that God, through his son Jesus, took all of our places. And King David certainly knew that pain and that grief and that heartbreak as part of the human experience. We all know that patience is something that we don't pray for, right? Because if you pray for patience, you are going to find yourself in a situation that tests your patience to the uttermost. So we joke often that we don't pray for patience. But there are many examples of people in the Bible who had to wait patiently. We know that Hannah struggled with infertility and just longing to have a child of her own, and had to wait for the birth of her son Samuel. We know that Abraham had to wait 25 years for his promised son, 25 years for his son Isaac. We know that Jacob had to wait 14 years to marry his beloved Rachel. And so if you are praying for a spouse, just know that God is faithful to honor that desire of your heart. It will be worth the wait, but you might be waiting a while. And I hope it's not 14 years for your sake, but it will be worth it if you do have to wait that long. We know, as we just talked about, that Joseph waited 13 years for God to redeem his story. And, you know, the book of Job, where Job lost every ounce of wealth that he had accumulated. He lost his entire family, heartbreak, tragedy, immense grief, but he remained faithful to God and decided to trust God through all of that. And one of my favorite lines in the book of Job, having gone through my own previous life tragedy and just heartbreak, and having life and everything I had ever known in my life just decimated to ashes, I've always clung to this particular verse in the book of Job. It's in the very end, so chapter 42. It's one of the last lines. Chapter 42, verse 12. It says that the Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first. And I actually have my name written right next to that line. And so it is a very known fact, friend, that to walk on this earth for any length of time, you are going to face trial. You're going to face temptation. You're going to face potentially being ghosted in relationship, or the betrayal of a friend or a family member. You are going to be tested in your patience. You are going to be tested through grief and through heartbreak. And one of the ultimate ways that the enemy tests us is that he causes us to doubt the character and intention of God towards us. God's kindness, his love, his faithfulness, his promise that our life can be redeemed, that the latter part of our story can be better and more beautiful even than the first part. That's God's promise to us. He talks about in the book of Isaiah, chapter 63, I believe, where he talks about giving us beauty for ashes. He promises to take those parts of your life that are the most painful, that you don't understand, that you question, God, how could you have allowed this to happen? He promises to take those and to bring beauty out of them, to give you beauty for ashes. Okay, that's what I have tattooed on my wrist. That's what this is symbolic of. This is Jesus in Hebrew and the crown of beauty for ashes. And in Romans 8:28, he talks about working all things together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. Does that mean that all things that happen to us in this life are going to be good? Of course not. But he works all things together for good in this mysterious, profound way that you and I will never be able to understand on this side of eternity. And there are just things that we have to surrender to God and have to trust him with those parts of our life. And so that's my chat for this morning. Staying the course of God, with God, considering it pure joy whenever you face those situations in life that test your faith and test your character, because those situations will produce perseverance. They will bring you to maturity and completeness where you're not lacking anything, where you are most equipped and most effective for doing the work that God has placed you on this earth during this time, in this period in history, to do. Stay the course with God. James chapter 1, verses 2-4. I encourage you to dive into that during your own time this week, to examine the parts of your life where you may be being tested in that area. And if you're not currently being tested, I promise you that at some point you're going to be, no matter how long you've walked with the Lord, no matter how spiritually mature you may think you are, we all are capable of encountering experiences and setbacks that take us right back to feeling like we're a new believer again and difficulty in trusting God. But if you stay the course, I promise you it's going to be worth it. Be blessed, friends. Have a great week, and we can't wait to see you next Sunday.